And then just taking the feet as wide as the mat so the knees can kind of knock in towards one another. And hands can go wherever that is comfortable. And in the practice today, and this is kind of similar to what I did yesterday, is kind of taking the theory of the practice or the theory of where you're at with your body or a thought and, you know, making that meet in a very kind of like we being more active in meeting that with our breath, or like creating and manifesting, you know, into that space. So here, this is a restful posture. It's borderline like restorative-esque without support. And we're also in the entrance to the practice. So whatever that theory or that thought or that concept, you know, means to you, begin to then kind of work into practicing or drawing in elements of the practice and kind of keeping that, that bubble within how the workings of the mind body, the breath body, and the physical body, and how we can actively kind of begin to practice into that. So really taking theory and bringing it into like form, or like manifesting a concept, more air element, and bring in more like an earth element kind of quality. And so how do we do that? You know, notice the response of the body here. Notice like softening of areas. Notice the breath. And what physically can you partake in to create this space of rest or entering into the practice? And then how can we kind of also actively tune into the mind, you know, settling into that process so the mind finds rest as well. And then through this path, like it's a lot of exploration, but it's exploring without any judgment. It's just kind of pure, playful exploration into kind of taking that more active role, or taking that thought and bringing it into form. And taking a few more cycles with your breathing. Again, just settling into a space of rest. And then from those last few rounds, the next space we'll move into is taking the legs straight up. So we're coming into like more activity. Okay, so there's engagement, and then there's also non-engagement. So recognize this space for what it is. We're still at the beginning of our practice. Our body is still, you know, kind of defining how we practice here. And we're going to do the lowering, we've done this before, of the heels down towards the ground in 3 increments. So that will be within the exhale. So just lower right now, even without the breath, so that the heels hover. Okay, and then you'll use that inhale to fly the legs back up overhead.
Try to keep the toes pointed like behind your head towards that wall, and then the soles of the feet parallel if possible. So the inhale flies our legs back up, and then the exhale is 3 increments of lowering before we hover. And then use the nature of the inhale to guide the activity of the legs back up. Arms can tee out or they can come down by your side. And I want you to continue just with this movement. The inhale drives us back up, and the exhale is part of the active lowering. And again, take the theory, like the concept of what is happening. There's a lot of abdominal engagement here, and take it into form. Like bring this into the practice and combine the elements of the mind body, the breath body, and the physical body. Let's try to get 2 more in. And then after that second round, just pause in Vipariti Karani, or legs up the wall, for a moment. Good, and then slowly lower so the soles of the feet meet the mat, but keep the knees bent. Walk those feet wide, knees knock in towards one another. Back into a restful space. And start to work and proceed in creating that restful space. So we may actively have to settle the breath. We may actively have to be aware of the body. And actively aware of, like, where is the mind at? Rest has to be more than just a concept. Like, as we know, sleeping is not always restful. There is activity, and oftentimes extra activity, if we kind of like, drink coffee before we go to bed, or, things like that. We're not taking the theory of rest and bringing it into form. So work that in a practice-like sense here. Good, couple more rounds with the breath. And then we'll transition by taking right ankle to left knee, so figure 4. And then take your right hand to the right thigh and press it away. So use like your palm of your hand against like the meat of the right thigh, and press that away. Take the left arm angled up overhead. So it's not straight up overhead, but it's kind of like angling off into a corner. And with the right hand pressing into the right thigh, left arm comes up overhead and flat on the ground, but more angled, not straight. Yeah, palm facing up. And then keep pressing right hand into right thigh as the legs fall off over towards the left hand side. And when that hand kind of comes away, keep the activity and the feeling of the legs drawing together. So you'll have to use some kind of muscular control, even feeling like the right ankle is pressing into the left knee. Drive that right knee away from the body. Take the right arm up overhead, same thing, angled, palm facing up. And in this space of activity and sensation, see if you can bring in the thought, the concept of that slower breath practice. So the body is kind of doing something different. Physical body has different sensations. See if you can work the mind and the breathing back into that restful concept. Good, 2 more rounds. Slow and steady. And then after that second round, keep the legs pressing towards one another, but draw them back up to center. Take your right knee into the chest, so interlace the fingertips, they'll come to the shin, and then straighten the left leg, but have it hover over the mat. So toes pointing towards the ceiling, active left leg, and really drawing the right leg towards you. Hold here. Left heel comes down to the mat. Take the left hand and draw that right leg off towards the left hand side. Even if you want to place it, outside the knee or outside that right leg. And then take the right arm back up into that angled space with the palm facing up. And continue to draw the body kind of in 2 different directions. So we're twisting and kind of really actively drawing that right leg down, and the same thing, reaching away, up and away with that right arm. And come back to the process of a restful breath. Get a couple more rounds of the breathing. And then have that come back up, the body unwinds, both knees bent, soles of feet against the mat. And a couple of deep, full breaths. So notice like the release from a posture or a shape or a hold. And encourage that kind of intuitive, like I feel like the body becomes a little intuitive with what it needs. Or it kind of speaks louder its needs or desires. Take left ankle to right knee. Left hand comes in to the meat, like of the thigh, and it presses that leg away. We'll take the right arm up and angled, palm facing up. And as those legs fall off towards the right, when that hand can't hold on any longer, keep the sensation of those legs pressing in towards one another. Left hand comes up overhead into that angled position. And feel the drawing of the body kind of in 2 different directions. And so there's activity, there's engagement in the physical body within the legs. And the practice here takes us into the mind and the breath creating, resignaling activity into a more restful or kind of yoking or uniting with a bit more of a restful dynamics of the breath. Good, a few more rounds. And then let the legs kind of return back up. Draw that left knee towards the chest, straightening the right leg, but actively keeping it hovering and really strong in that right leg. And this is the same kind of strength that you use for standing poses. It's the same idea. Right heel comes down, and then right hand draws that bent knee off over towards the right hand side. Left arm comes up and angled. And in the signaling and firing of any sensations, the mind and our breathing kind of draw the physical realm into a slower, steadier concept. A couple more rounds with the breathing. And then return back, knees bent, soles the feet, and just kind of honoring the desires of the body. Good, we'll take the legs back up. And we'll do another round of the lower abdominal exercises. So lowering in 3 increments. Use that inhale to drive those legs back up. Exhale is still active, but there's a lowering and a release. And then there's an inhale that really kind of drives everything back up. Let's try to get a couple more rounds in. And then after that second round, bend the knees, grab behind the legs, and roll up into a cross-legged seated position. And rolling up into that cross-legged seated position. And really kind of sending yourself right into a seat of meditation. And let that activity, eyes closed or open, spine tall, but the theory of meditation, let it be fully as present as you can practice. So we kind of give our best effort, just like my little kindergartner. And that's always good enough. It's more than enough. I'm going to take a couple more moments here. And then kind of softly allow yourself to open from this space. We're going to come flat on our bellies and right into Sphinx. And so some of our mind and breath body and even our physical body, settled into that seat of meditation. So part of that process has been initiated. We're not warm and sweaty, but do encourage maybe a bit more sensation in the lower back. So allow there to still be a place of activity or even slightly uncomfortable. And that can come from pressing the hands and the forearms down, or if you need to rise up into seal. So the theory, the concept is that we're designing a little bit more bend in the lower back. But we're keeping the theory of meditation here in a bit more of drawing inward. And using our effort as a practitioner, our best effort. Kind of keeping
this energetic or form, like, and kind of transversing that into your wide-legged child's pose. So notice the hands press to help the body rise, the legs slide, the knees slide, and then drop in. Walk the hands out, and then the body settles. We're settling back into like a more restful space. This is a bit more internal. So how are you going to meet like what is happening? Kind of slide through that from the physical body, the breath body, and the mind body. How is your best effort going to show up, just practicing within those spaces? And kind of keep that concept into form as you walk both hands off over towards the right hand side and take your left hand on top of the right hand. Is there spaces that you can encourage to lengthen or draw back here? Walk the hands off over to left hand side. Same thing, right hand on top of left. And go through the same steps. Or explore like into those steps. Good, take the hands back through center. And then really kind of slowly uncurl and notice the process of the uncurling as you come up on the heels with the legs wide. Keep the spine tall. And find that seat of meditation just for a few moments. And for me, meditation, is really keeping my mind in the cycle of my breath so that it almost becomes like unconditional or conditioned without conscious thought. And the physical vessel has to be, in a space with a tall spine. And it's a process. So allow the exploring, the non-judgment, and any like little shifting. It doesn't have to be a frozen place. And then coming into some gentle movement, the inhale here takes the spine up, and then exhale, just twist off to a side and kind of pop one hip forward. And this will just kind of go softly, like let it be a softer movement, inhaling to center, exhaling around to the other side. And again, notice like instead of like a forceful driving, like see if you can get the quality to be just a little bit softer. Doesn't necessarily have to be slower. Good, and then have that come back down into center. Draw the navel back towards the spine, so really round into that cat-like shape. And then inhale up into your cow. And in this kind of undulating back and forth between the seated cat and cow, I want you to really think about that space above your belly button and just the releasing and the drawing back of it to create this shape. Let the head and the neck and the shoulders be secondary or third kind of movements. Good, let's take one more in each direction. And then coming into the more neutral space with the spine. Our left leg is going to bend behind us. And you can keep the angle like of the knee really bent, or you can keep the leg out a little bit more. And then just take your right leg out in front of you. So one leg is out straight and the other leg is bent to whatever degree you want. And so work into the design and the form of the sensations that you experience. So I usually feel less if my back knee is bent a bit more. I'll feel more if I kind of come out a little wider with it. And then take this right leg like as wide as you want it as well. So you begin to kind of feel more sensations through the pelvis. Then take the belly button and twist it so it's directly in line with your big toe. Arms come up overhead. Try to take the arms as straight as possible. And then come, like really feel like the hinging at the hip, but sends the body up. Like take length, 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 length as you come out and down. So keep stretching and lengthening the spine as the hands reach towards the foot or the ankle. Let the head hang. Jaw is soft, eyes are soft. Make the skull soft, like let that sensation kind of permeate in. And as a thought, as a form, you know, work back into that concept. How can you actualize into softness? How can you self-regulate with the breath into softness and sensations? Take a deep full inhale. The hands slide up the legs and the exhale. Good. And then take both soles of the feet together. So kind of undo anything from there. Hands come down onto ankles. So this is Baddha Konasana. And then just move through some cow and cat. Again, really thinking about that space above the belly button. It's your third chakra. It's also the space of a bandha. It's your diaphragm. So it has both energetic and physical and breath related presences. You know, work with that kind of releasing forward and drawing back. And then the other actions are a bit more secondary or third, fourth. Good, one more in each direction. And then take the hands through or like underneath. So they're wrapping towards the shins, underneath the legs, and then draw up really tall through the spine. So feel this through the front of the shoulders. You may even feel the front of the neck. And either stay here like in stillness, or if you want to take movement of the head and neck, but keep like working activity and like really being strong in the arms and being really tall in the spine. But then there's, you know, some movement and like a freedom like sensation through the top, the head, maybe into those areas of tightness. Good. And then pausing back to center, releasing from this, but just keeping the hands on the shins, and come back into just a few moments of like that space of meditation. So kind of, you know, we tug at the body and then we're going to pull it back into like a bit of a softer quality. And in my opinion, meditation is a very challenging place. So the stillness that speaks of the physical body, you know, may not necessarily speak for the mind or the breath body. And just kind of give our best effort in awareness, non-judgment, and just taking any subtle shifts in practicing this space. Couple more rounds with your breathing. And then kind of keeping some of this creation here as you shift into the next posture with the left leg out in front of us and that right knee behind. Divine the setup, navel to spine, arms come up and then reach up, out, and down. And just settle there. Head soft, jaw soft. We bring in concepts of, you know, hard and soft, qualities of sensation, and maybe rewiring some of the brain body connection in working with the mind and the breath. Couple more rounds. And then the hands can kind of slide up the legs in the exit. And let's take both legs out in front of us. Toes are actively pointing towards the ceiling, and then hands coming down by your side. So Dandasana with the eyes open for a few moments, feeling like that real tall spine and muscular engagement. And then inhale, length of the spine. Exhale, take your right hand to the outside of the left foot or the left ankle. And then take your left arm behind you and reach it off behind you. You should kind of feel this through the back of the right shoulder. So twisting here, kind of grabbing onto foot or ankle. And so use like that, like pure physics here, like the body's kind of going in one direction with the right hand to the left foot, and then we're trying to send it in another direction with that left hand behind us. So opposing forces, and meet it in the middle with equality in your breathing. And that same quality that we're trying to keep the mind steady into. Good, let this go. Come back, Dandasana with the hands down by your side. Use that pressing into the ground for the spine. And then left hand to right ankle. Same thing on this side, but reach your right arm behind you. Couple more rounds with the breath. And then come back, Dandasana. And then we'll come up to stand in the center of our mats, facing the long edge of our mat. And feel those leg muscles again, like be really, really strong, just like we did at the very beginning with one leg kind of toe pointing and hovering. Like that's the strength we want to bring into the legs. And so use that for particularly the mountain pose stance, but the same kind of engagement that we're going to take from some of the standing poses. So arms will come out to the right and the left, and then I want you to step your feet as wide as you'd like. A good reference point is ankles underneath wrists. Your left foot is just going to turn in slightly, and then your right foot will pivot so it's fully, the toes are fully facing that short edge. Now drop into this. So you're just dropping into your warrior two. More length between the legs creates a bit more of a depth that you can drop in, but keep those legs kind of firing. And as the legs stay firing, right elbow to right knee, extended side angle. Good, and then keep the legs and try to keep the legs not from moving back up into your warrior two. So Virabhadrasana. Good, and keep doing that. So extended side angle. Utthita Parsva Konasana into Virabhadrasana. Good, and then get the breath on board with this. And the quality of the breath here is probably a bit more energetic, moving away from like that slower, could be a slower, steadier breath, but it needs to have a bit of an energy to it in this transitioning. Good, let's take one more. And then straightening the legs, pointing both feet forward, and either heel toe or just step them back into mountain pose. Take the shoulders, just roll them around a few times. Keep the legs really strong
So the idea is firmness and strength here creates actually some more space of freedom and release in other areas. Any neck movements, head movements? Good, and then let that settle into mountain pose. So take that body stillness and just hold for a few moments. Thought of meditation, but how are you going to manifest that into like actuality or form? Mind can stay with the breath. Focal point, drishti. But we have to kind of self-regulate, practicing into those spaces. Good, then take those arms out wide. Step the feet wide. Right foot comes in slightly, left foot fully points. Drop into the weight of the body to settle into your warrior two. Front knee bends, back leg stays straight. Good. Warrior two into extended side angle. Keep strong, stable legs as you come back up. Warrior two, extended side angle. So keep that movement. The legs have to stay really, really strong. Good, then coming back up to warrior two. Transition back to the front of your mat. Hands come to the hips. Keep the feet pointing towards the long edge of your mat and parallel with the short edge of your mat. And then just take the arms, interlace them, fingertips behind your back, and squeeze those shoulder blades together. Let the gaze look slightly up and feel like a back bend-esque quality as you look up, but send that spine up and back. Hold for one more breath. Release the hands to the hips, to the top of the pelvis, bend in the knees. Slide the hands down to the knees and really round through into the cat-like shape. Good, inhale, rise. Exhale, step or just heel, toe, heel your feet back together. Mountain pose. A seat of stillness. A seat of kind of tugging the body back into a softer space. And then getting the mind, maybe through staying with the process of the breath, into this softer form. Good, a couple more rounds. And then we'll come back down onto our bellies. And on the belly, hand over hand, up on the belly, yeah. And then hand over hand, just let the forehead come down onto the hands. And just notice the desire, like how the body desires to breathe here. Oftentimes, forward facing and backward facing, it's like an automatic response, right? We use this when we're sleeping. And the body, like instinctually and from wiring, is like, in that kind of moment, and like sometimes that letting go, see if you can kind of increase that length, and maybe, that the breath wants to fill so much. See if you can get it to extend beyond that. So you're like extending that moment. Good, and then taking right hand or right arm off to the side of your mat, left hand under left shoulder, gaze off to the left, roll off over to that right side body. And again, see if you can kind of keep that extension of an kind of moment, even though the body won't necessarily want to feel that or does not do that instinctually here. See if you can drive that in a little bit. And we do that from like a more conscious practice, being that active role. Good, and then let this kind of all settle back into that more central space. Couple rounds with the breath. And then we'll take that off to the other side. So left arm comes out straight. Right arm, right hand under right shoulder, gaze off to the right, roll off over to that side body. And in meeting these sensations, we're kind of just saying to the mind and the breath, let's like stay into that aha kind of moment. Or moment. Good, releasing from here. Back onto the belly. And then using that to come down onto the back. And just coming down onto the back, taking the knees into the chest. Just kind of like any movement with both legs or moving them separate. And then keeping the knees bent, soles the feet down to the mat. We'll take one round with bridge. Either kind of like pushing the boundaries or keeping it softer, whatever it kind of feels right. As we take into like the theory and the concept of coming, towards the end of the practice. And holding into that space and really kind of actualizing it in terms of what we want the physical, the breath, and the mind to practice into. Good, and then releasing that down. And just take one knee in and straighten the other leg out.
kind of bend it in. And then straighten that leg out and bend the other one in. Good, and then allow that to kind of settle and move into the space of Shavasana. And the concept and the theory and the idea of just letting the body be, and that, you know, it's said in yogic terms that all that has kind of manifested or been created consciously or unconsciously is unveiled in Shavasana. So our efforts, our practice, our non-judgment, all the little remnants. And I hope it's a good one. Thank you for practicing, and I'll see you soon.